In what ways does your media product use, develop or challenge forms and conventions of real media products?
The first task we did before starting our opening scene project was to follow up research on different genres that are currently in the media. My group and I researched some genres and concluded the conventions of each one. For example, actions are known for having one or more heroes who follow a series of tasks and investigations with fighting, chases and physical action. Another typical convention of action films is that they are filled with fast-paced editing, which helps keep the audience absorbed. A good example of this is all of the James Bond films. We did more research into the horrors, as this was the one we thought we were likely to do for our final project. Horrors often have a dramatic impact on audience emotions to keep them absorbed. They usually aim to create shock, fear or disgust to the audience. Some horrors are jumpy, some are gruesome, some are thought-provoking, and others try and create belief in the unknown. The most typical conventions of horror include a mix of these features: darkness, murders, death, unusual events, isolated locations, red herring scenes, and mysterious soundtrack or even silence. And these features help to create a stereotypical horror. A good example is Paranormal Activity. In this horror, the key conventions they used was the darkness, non-diegetic and diegetic sounds and handheld camera shots to create realism. When creating our opening sequence, we took on the typical conventions of horror. The two key focuses were to ensure that location was isolated or appeared that way. We chose a setting that seemed abandoned yet a common place to walk a dog, creating a mix of emotions to what may come next, leading the audience in different directions. The other key convention was to have a dark setting. The darkness portrayed vulnerability, mysteriousness and created a gloomy atmosphere. The vulnerability emotion created from this setting helped us to portray the character walking her dog as young, defenceless and in danger. We formed a stereotyped walking the dog costume to help us maintain this emotion, which prepared the audience for the next part of the clip. Our opening sequence revealed natural sounds. We used this to portray realism. For example, the typical baby tune played in the last scene. The emphasised footprints, door opening and the loud breathing were all sounds within the clip. The reason we only used diegetic sounds was because this allowed us to create more of a connection between the character and audience. Another key convention used was the type of camera shots. For example, the handheld camera helped show the emotional state and worry for the character, and the high angle shot before the girl walked up the stairs emphasised the danger she may be in.
Your media project represent particular social groups.
What kind of media institution might distribute your media product and why?
The type of media institution that would distribute my product would be institutions that deal with independent films. Independent films are often ones that are on a low budget and won't make it to Hollywood and big cinemas like Odeon. Independent films like mine are much more likely to be shown over the internet, film festivals, niche cinemas like the Phoenix or Channel 4 and other similar independent institutions that focus on a niche audience.
Who would be the audience for your media product and why?
typical young child is much less likely to watch horrors, as it's likely to scare them or give them nightmares, as they're unlikely to realise it's an untrue story. We also questioned grandparents and identified that they are not so keen on horrors and would rather watch other genres. This allowed us to justify and come to the conclusion that we were going to give our film certificate an age of 15. We are going to focus on an audience of people between 16 and 25, however we also hope that any person between 15 and 50 would also be interested if they like horror films. Many films will go towards a specific genre. For example, stereotypically we identified that girls prefer romance and guys prefer action. However, for horror, we identified that a mix of both genders enjoyed it and there were no clear evidence for one more than the other. Hobbies and lifestyle can affect the way that people think and watch a film. We are hoping to aim our audience at people with a similar lifestyle to us, who think similarly and have similar horror views about what is and what isn't scary. For example, our poll has shown that children are the scariest age characters in horrors, and we hope that our audience would think so too.
How did you address your audience?
The main way we helped to attract and address our audience was through the typical conventions that we used. Straight away, the title Hidden gives away that the film is going to be a horror, thriller, action or another film genre along those lines. The fact that the film starts with a dark location in an abandoned setting sets the scene and suggests that this film is going to be a horror due to the mysterious feeling about it. The characters within the opening sequence were used due to the research that we had identified about the stereotypical social groups and age of characters that horrors often portray, and this was in contrast to the location and setting, which is also a convention often used in horrors. For example, in Scream, the location outside is wet, dark and windy, and in contrast to that she is completely dry in her warm kitchen being a personal space within people's homes. The key factor that helped us appeal to the audience comes back to our initial question, which was the typical conventions used in a horror. These had a big impact on our opening sequence as they helped us to portray a similar emotion, and this helped us to attract our target audience.
What have you learnt about technologies from the process of constructing this product?
Looking back at your preliminary tasks, what do you feel you have learnt and the progression from that to the full product?
Since the beginning of the year, when I first set out to film a preliminary task, my skills and understanding of the equipment and technology has developed and improved, making the quality of my final piece a whole lot better to what it would have been. The pre-filming we did to experiment with shots of the location chosen allowed us to ensure that we wanted to use the location and to clarify that the storyboard was going to work effectively. After pre-filming, we started filming the final production. We often did at least 3 shots of each scene to allow us to have more than one shot to experiment with during editing. This was another point we identified in the prelim task, as we did not have enough shots to experiment with, meaning that it didn't flow as well as hoped. The editing took about 3 weeks. Due to already having an understanding of the software, it was much easier to start right away, which saved time and allowed us to create a higher quality final piece.